Hello, and welcome back to another Dating Beyond Borders episode. Today's episode is going to be a collage style podcast, which is going to feature four creators. And the reason I want to do this is because at this point, I have over 80 episodes and so much valuable information that a lot of you haven't had a chance to listen to because these are long episodes. But today, I wanted to pick out the best snippets of those podcasts and bring them to this episode. And the topic of today's collage style podcast is dating in the US versus dating in Europe. And the reason I wanted to share this one is firstly because I have so many American creators in Europe or Europeans in the US talking about this, but I also wanted to contrast and compare different countries in Europe because so often we get reels on Instagram that kind of portray Europe as this big entity and US as this big entity and just compare them, lump them together, and make a really broad generalization. But today I wanted to bring to light four creators, all of whom are from different European countries, and compare that to dating in the US. And at the end of that podcast, I want you to answer the question, which resonated the most with you? Which do you like the most? Is it US? Is it Europe? And which country in Europe, if it is Europe? And if you guys have been listening for a while and are not yet subscribed or following the channel, it would literally mean the world to me. It takes 1 second. It's free. It doesn't take away from your day, but it means a lot to me. It means that I can get to that next level and finally get the channel monetized, get the podcast monetized. It also means that I have the chance to invite some of the most interesting guests on this podcast, which is also a huge benefit to you who's listening to the podcast. And it means that I can take it to that next level. And your help is everything in getting me to that point. So if you have a second now, stop the podcast, go follow, and let me know in the comments if you did so. And I'll send you a personal thank you. And now, without further ado, on to the episode. So my first guest for today is Ana. She is a Spaniard from Valencia, and she's been living in Kansas. Out of all the places in the US, she has settled down in Kansas with her American husband and her two kids. And she's been there for over 9 years. So it's been a really, really long time. This is one of my favorite episodes. And that's because we really dive into very specific cultural nuances between living in a city like Valencia and a city like Kansas. And, talking about things like motherhood, what it's like raising kids in both places. And that's such an interesting conversation that I haven't had with anyone else besides her. So if that's something you're interested in, go have a listen. We also talk about the lifestyle differences. There are so many of those and priorities. But this specific snippet obviously focuses on the dating differences. And there are many, many, many. So hope you enjoy.
I will say the main difference that I see and the first thing that I noticed, with my now husband is Spain has more of a 50-50 mentality, whether in the US, the men are more, I would say more like, they act more like gentlemen, right? They usually pay for the first date. And most of the dates, I want to say, they get your coat, they open the door for you. And it's funny because I interviewed two high school exchange students from Spain. They actually are spending the year here in Kansas. They live 15 minutes away from me. And they came over, super sweet, and we were talking about their experience, right? Dating in high school. They both have American boyfriends now. And it's funny because they were like, hey, this month, I haven't spent more than $20. And they were thinking, and they're like, it's because their boyfriends pay for everything. And I'm like, that is very American. A Spanish man could never. So I would say the Spanish mentality is more 50-50. Like, hey, I work, you work, we're splitting the bill. Whether in America is more, I'll take it of you. Like I want to invite you, then I'm going to pay for it.
So on the first date in the US, is it more than formal versus, Spain? It's like, let's get a caña, let's get a beer, let's take a walk, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, in Spain is more, we can go for a walk or let's grab a beer, a glass of wine, right? As a first date type of thing. I think in America, it's a little bit more formal. But I want to say they do go yeah, I would say they go for like nicer dinners and things like that. But definitely, they are more American men think more about the opening the door, pick you up at your house. I will always remember the first like official date with Matt, my husband. I remember he always picked me up at my house. He always dropped me off at my house. He didn't leave until I was inside my house, like making sure that I'm safe, paid for my first meals. And I always offer to say no. Like my first thought was, I will always remember the first time he put my coat on. It was funny. We finished eating dinner and I'm about to grab my coat and he's like, no, let me do it. And in my head, I didn't think, oh, that's so sweet. I thought I can do it myself. Like I never had a man putting a coat on me or, like opening the door of the car for me to get in. I was like, what? I was confused. It's the truth. I wasn't like, oh, he's so sweet. I was like, what? Like I can do it myself. Like I can open the door, and then, you just understand that it's part of the culture. Obviously, some men go that extra mile, to make you feel special, which I honestly love. And yeah, I thought, wow, what a gentleman a Spanish guy could never. That was my first thought.
We're going to get a lot of people saying in the comments, well, your husband is probably from a region in the US that is very chivalrous. So maybe not all Americans are like that. But then again, compared to Spanish guys, it's still a lot more chivalrous, even if that doesn't involve putting on the coat on someone, because that is absolutely amazing, by the way. I think that's really beautiful and very old fashioned, but really chivalrous.
Yeah. And I have to say, to this day, he still does it. We got married in 2018. And it's funny because there are many times, we're finishing dinner, he puts the coat on and we go to the car and I go to my side. And many times he comes to my side. And to this day, the first thing that comes to my mind is, oh, I'm driving, like maybe he wants me to drive. And he goes, Anna, we've been together for so many years. I'm opening the door and I'm like, oh my God. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I even forget.
The question that some people might ask is, well, if I go to Spain and I do that and a Spanish woman freaks out, because Spanish women are renowned for being, very strong feminists, very strong and independent women. Is it something that you would advise foreign men to try? Maybe not putting on the coat, but paying for a dinner, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think at the end of the day, whether, we think, I'm a strong woman, I can do this. Of course we can, right? But I think it's just super nice. I think that they will love it. And if someone feels uncomfortable, then, just say it like, don't do this. I don't like it. Again, it's like I mentioned before, I think communication is key, but I do think that, it is a nice gesture and I think it will be appreciated. Absolutely. If you want to pay my meal, pay my meal.
I like the honesty. I also think though, like if you live in a place where that is not commonly done, you're going to appreciate it even more because you're like, I'm going out with all these Spanish guys. They haven't even paid for my drink. Like what a nice thing it is to have someone who is a gentleman, because I think every woman wants a gentleman. If someone is offended by that, well, then you can have a conversation about that. Right. But, exactly. And then, okay, chivalry is one. I think you'd also mentioned there was like a casualness present in Spanish relationships that is not as present in American relationships. There's more of a focus on something more committed and serious.
Yes, definitely. I feel like Americans put a lot of pressure onto the marriage, dating and marriage. Again, I think their priority. And as I mentioned before, this is a circle, right? A vicious cycle. I think they see marriage as a part of being successful, right? So the earlier I get married, the earlier I have kids, it means that I'm successful, right? I have a well-established family from the outside. We're all perfect. Whether I would say Spanish women and Spanish couples, they focus more first on career, dating longer. Okay. It is very normal for Spanish couples to date 5, 6, 7 years, honestly, even more before getting married. So yeah, I do think the priorities are a little bit different. I still don't understand that, the obsession with getting married quick because the age I think doesn't matter. Some people are more mature than others, but that like I need to get married by 30. Like that's a very American mentality. And I see it on social media too. Many videos of women saying my goal was to have 2 or 3 kids by the age of 30 and be done. And I was like, oh wow, like honestly, I think the average age for the Spanish women to have their first kids right now, I believe it's 32 or 33. And I'm like, what? That is so different. That's when we, Spanish women start having kids. So definitely super different.
I wonder though, I think it's a great way to date for Spanish men, right? Because they're like, they can have a cake and eat it too. They can enjoy the, sleeping with someone, but then it doesn't have to lead to anything committed. And I think it works for a lot of women, but I think there's a certain age that you hit. Let's say you're 35 and you're like, I don't have 5 years to date someone casually, right? And so do you feel like it's impacted your friends a little bit in Spain, or are they happy with this arrangement?
I think that they are happy because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how old you are. If let's say if I was single and I was 35, the way I think is I'd rather get married later, but make sure that he's the one than getting married at, 21 and then being divorced, by 23. So again, I think that making sure that you choose the right partner is way more important than getting married earlier, and not playing with fire. Because again, you might get married at 20 or, Utah, these states, Arizona, and they get married super young. Of course, they can spend the rest of their life together. It doesn't mean you're going to get divorced because you get married, super early. No, absolutely not. But, what I'm saying is that Spanish women don't mind waiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my fear is that if I'm dating someone for like 7 years and he doesn't want anything committed, that at some point where he's just going to break up and I'm going to be alone and then I'll have to start again from scratch, right? So I can imagine maybe with Spanish women, they don't mind it as much because they're just like, I'm fine on my own. If anything, I'll have a child on my own, And I know a lot of Spanish women do this as well. There are quite a lot of single mothers because they're like, screw this. I'm just going to take matters into my own hands. I'll have my own life.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that you mentioned is that, maybe they break up with you. The fact that you are not engaged or married after 7 years, it doesn't mean that you're not committed. Because a lot of my friends, have been dating their partners now for, 6, 7 years, and they are so very much in love. They are committed. They do not have open relationships. So again, longer dating doesn't mean that they are not committed. It means that they are just not prepared for marriage, or that marriage is not their end goal right at this second. Also, weddings are very expensive. Spanish people don't make, as much money as Americans do. So it is very common to get married later on as well because of that, because it's very expensive right now, right? 2025, like life is expensive. And so I think that there's a lot of priorities before the wedding itself, if that makes sense. But again, that doesn't mean that they are not committed.
Yeah, I think this is key because it's not about the actual paper. It's more about the fact that you two are committed. So what you're saying is that it's not that Spanish people are not committed to each other. It's just that they're not in a rush or they don't really see a need to get married.
Correct. 100%.
How long did it take you to get married to your husband?
Not a lot. I did get married young. I actually had my first kid at 25, which it is super young most of my friends in Spain, my group of friends, I was the first one getting married, first one having kids. And actually, one of my best friends, she got married last year. That's the second of my group friends. So 5 years later, actually 8 years later, before me of getting married. And then one of my friends just had, her first kid, but that's just 2 people out of maybe 15. So definitely not common, but I knew he was the one. So when you know, you know.
Second guest, Feli, was again one of my favorites. This is one of the earlier episodes that I did, and you can see that in just a second that it was one of my first. She's German from Munich, and she has moved to Cincinnati. So she's living in the Midwestern part of the US. So her references to what the dating is like obviously echo that of the Midwest. And one of the things that I found especially interesting was her talking about living together as a couple in the US and living together as a couple in Germany, and how that's different. Anyways, hope you enjoy the snippet.
It's interesting because I think I went on my first date in the US just a few weeks after I came here, because I started dating someone in the US. And I think most of my culture shocks happened then, and not so much in my current relationship, because my current boyfriend I met like almost 5 years after I first came here. So at that point, I was already very used to how dating worked here. I think one of the biggest shocks was the gender roles in a way and how traditional dating was in a lot of cases. So, for example, for my first date with my ex-boyfriend, he came and picked me up at my place with his car. And I didn't expect that. Like, in Germany, it's very common that you just meet up at a place and both people get there and then you leave from there, unless if you want to hang out more. But it's not really something that, like, someone picks you up at your house and then they bring you back home afterwards. I knew that from American movies, and I was like, oh, interesting. I didn't expect that to happen. Then he paid on the first date, which is not something that's uncommon in Germany, but it's also not like super expected. I feel like for first date nowadays, it might almost be more common in Germany that you split the bill, or that somehow you like one person pays for dinner and then the other person pays for drinks or pays for dessert or something, so that it's like equal. So that was definitely not a huge surprise, as I said, but I noticed it. Then I noticed also that that wasn't only a thing on the first date, but on following dates as well. And whenever I did want to pay, it was like something that he turned down. And I think he almost felt embarrassed about it. Like, I remember one time, and honestly, maybe this is a little bit trashing him a little bit, but I thought that was too much, that I offered to pay, and he was like, okay, cool, yeah, you can pay, but you have to give me your card because it's weird if the guy doesn't, like, I want it to look like I'm paying. And so that was weird to me. I was like, what? I mean, I was like, okay, whatever, you can give him my card, I don't care. But like, why is your ego so fragile that you need to make it look in front of the waiter and the other guests that you're the one paying? That's something I noticed. And then chivalry is a big thing where, like, American guys are very big on holding the door open, opening the car door for you, walking on the outside of the sidewalk, so towards the street. That's like a thing that I had never heard of before I came to the US. I forget what the reason for it is. I think it has some historical reason that I think maybe they didn't want the woman to get dirty from like horse waste or something like that in the streets. But basically, like, a lot of guys feel like it's impolite if they let the woman walk on the street side of the sidewalk.
With dating in Germany, and I don't know how your experience has been or how many boyfriends you've had in Germany, but was there something that you feel is lacking in the German dating culture? Do you wish Germans did this more?
I think a lot of people in Germany miss that guys even approach them. I think just it comes with how reserved we are as a culture, is that guys don't really approach women a lot, or vice versa. It's just a little bit more, people are holding back a little bit more, and it's a little harder to just even meet people to begin with. Other than that, honestly, I was in long-term relationships, and one main long-term relationship in Germany, and so were most of my friends at the time. And a big difference, this doesn't really tie in with your question of like what I miss, but it's a big difference that I've noticed, is that in my late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, all throughout that all throughout that time, it was very common for me and my friends to have long-term committed relationships. And it was common to be with someone for a few years, even if you already maybe knew that you weren't going to get married. Whereas here, I felt like when I met people in their early 20s and they were in a long-term relationship, either they were already married, or I even met people that were already divorced at 21 or something like that, which was crazy to me. Or it was like, once you were in a long-term relationship, everyone expected you to get married. Like, it was kind of like this huge commitment. Whereas in Germany, I feel like you can still be with someone and live with them. I also lived with my boyfriend in Germany for a few years. A lot of people do that for practical reasons too. It's not that big of a deal. Whereas here, when people moved in with each other, and I think the Midwest is very conservative in that regard, a lot, like, their families and their friends would automatically expect, oh, Okay, now you're getting married. Or they weren't even allowed to live with each other until they got married. So I think in a lot of regards, relationships are a little bit more realistic in Germany in the sense of it's okay to be with someone for a few years and maybe you'll drift apart. Maybe the way that your lives develop, it doesn't line up and in a few years you're going to break up. That doesn't mean that you can't be together now. In the US, I always felt like it's a little more all or nothing. Like either you're fully in it now or like you can't be in it at all. And going hand in hand with that is one of the biggest things that I don't like about American dating. So now I've switched to like, what do I not like about American dating? Is I think people here are so scared of commitment and confrontation. And Germans are not scared of confrontation as a culture. Like that's confrontation is in our blood. And even though in dating, people are maybe a little bit more scared of confrontation than they would be with a friend, it's still very normal to be very honest and open with each other as you date someone. To just tell them transparently, hey, I don't think you're a good match for me, but I really like hanging out with you. I'd be down to have like a friends with benefits thing or something like that. Or just telling someone, hey, that was really nice 3 dates. I don't really think that we're a good match, period. And I'm not saying ghosting doesn't exist in Germany. It definitely does, but not as much as in the US. Ghosting in the US is crazy. And it's not just something that I've experienced myself, but also just being in college and having roommates and having friends. It was literally the norm. Being ghosted was normal almost. Like I've had friends where they were dating someone, not like being exclusive, but just like going on a few dates, which that was also always a huge thing with like, are we exclusive or not? And the guy asked them to meet his mom next weekend, and he was staying at her place overnight, and then he literally got up in the middle of the night and left. And that was the last time that she ever heard from him. Like, what is happening? Crazy. And that's not even that odd of a story. I've heard several of those stories. I've been ghosted myself. It's weird, and I feel like it has to do with Americans being so scared of confrontation that they really, really, really don't want to tell you something uncomfortable to your face or even via text, that they'd rather just disappear and hope that you get the hint.
I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Germany, when you're dating each other, you're just going to date each other. Let's see how that goes. If it doesn't work, we break up. But in the US, the idea is to date as many people as you want until you have the talk, which is where you determine that you're exclusive. But until then, it's expected that you're going to be dating multiple people, right?
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
such a difference.
That was a huge culture shock for me as well, because like I'm glad that with my first boyfriend it wasn't really an issue, but he did have the talk with me at some point, and he asked if I'm his girlfriend. And I was like, I thought I was. Like for me, that was already implied. Like we've been doing all these relationship things, and I know that some Germans also have the talk, but in a lot of relationships, it's also just kind of implied. Like it just happens. Like you just naturally develop into a relationship. And as you said, as soon as you kind of do things in like a dating manner, you would expect the other person to automatically not see other people unless they ask you if that's okay. So it would be more like the default is that you don't see other people. And if you do want to see other people, you have to have a talk about that. Whereas in the US, as you said, it's the other way around. Like the default is that, of course, you're going to be seeing other people until you have to talk about being exclusive. And then especially in like your 20s, from what I experienced, a lot of people are very, very scared of the being exclusive talk. A lot of people are going to be like, let's not put labels on it. I just want to have fun. I just want to hang out. I don't want to like have a commitment. I don't want to put the label boyfriend or relationship. And I think that's very toxic in a lot of ways because I don't really know what people are scared of. You can be someone's boyfriend and then still break up 3 months later. It's okay. But I think Americans are so scared of that confrontation that they would then have to break up again, that they don't even want to commit in the first place.
The third guest is Lucille. She is one of the most incredibly authentic and sweet people that I've had a chance to interview. Lucille has been in a relationship with an American guy. I think he's from New York for over 8 years. And they live between Paris and New York. So we get a little bit of a different focus here because she is comparing the dating to New York, which is notoriously horrible. Definitely not Midwestern by any means. And so we talk about what it's like dating in France and dating in New York.
I do feel this, the structured dating of the US can be a bit artificial to me. It does seem sometimes a bit like a job interview. And I wonder if it's the best way to get a feel for the person. I do not need to know everything about their life, like if they have siblings, what do they do for work, or very structured questions. This will come up naturally in a conversation, I feel. Another thing that I find funny is people date many people at the same time. I'm so happy I'm not in the New York dating scene, because it seems exhausting keeping track of all this data about so many different people. It's not fun anymore. You don't really get to meet the person really. And that's something that as a French person, I do find a bit off-putting about the dating culture. At least in New York, obviously it's a big, big city, so people have many options.
You go with the flow more, right? You
yes,
kind of
way
go
more.
with the feeling. I have a feeling that in France, it's a little bit less about having certain labels, and it's more about just going with the feeling and saying, I like you, you like me, we have good chemistry, and let's see where that goes. As opposed to in the US, it's more about, I like you, but I don't want to show too much interest and just date you. And I want to keep my options open. What I liked as well was that you said it's not that important how many siblings you have or what you do for a job. Those are things that don't actually build attraction. Those are things that are just, okay, great, check. Like you don't even need to know someone's name in order to, these are things that are insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree.
I think a lot of times on these dating apps when people ask each other, what do you do for work? Like that does nothing, because if you don't like the person, the amount of siblings they have, the job they do, maybe the job they do really matters for certain people, but that does nothing in actually seeing if you're compatible with a person.
I feel what attracted me to Bobby when we met is, even though we were from different cultures and had different life experiences, we shared the same values and the same things we want in life. And we're really a perfect match on all these, non-concrete things that you cannot really define, but that make the relationship.
Yeah. It's always great when you meet organically like this in person.
Yeah.
And you skip the dating.
Yes. Oh, God. Especially when we moved to New York, with our single friends there, I was like, oh my God, you guys are dating so many people. That seems exhausting. And also, the pressure to define the relationship. This I was not aware of before we moved to New York, but, having to say, okay, now we're boyfriend and girlfriend, it's official, and having to have this talk, is not something you do in France, we often joke with Bobby that we've never had the talk about whether we were boyfriend or girlfriend, because it's just happened. You don't need to ask the other person if they want to be with you. They're literally, in our case, we're living together, traveling together all the time. So there's no need to define anything because it's already defined in action.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about French women versus American women. Were there any differences that you've noticed between the two?
Yeah, that's something I really like. I think in a lot of different parts in Europe, but especially in France, that there's less pressure to look a certain way. I'm not a model. I'm not making money with my looks. So, if I feel good, and I don't bother anyone, then I'm good. And I feel that's a mindset a lot of people have. Obviously, there's a lot of internalized pressure, especially the pressure to be thin is very, very big in France compared to other countries. And it's, hurting people mentally, obviously. But there's less pressure on doing your makeup or your hair. I would say even there's a pressure to not do it too much, because if you try hard and you fail, then it's worse than not trying at all.
And the last episode is with Colby, who is an American journalist living in Leuven, Belgium. And we talk about the differences with dating in the US as a gay guy and dating in Belgium as a gay guy. I really like this episode because it's one of the only episodes that I have talking about the LGBTQ plus dating scene, something that I don't know very much about. And I really, really enjoyed his point of view. It was so refreshing. And he really questioned a lot of the themes that have to do with how gay people are portrayed in movies and media, and pride parades, and the grinder culture, and why that's actually detrimental to gay people. So overall, the episode is absolutely, it's a must listen. I really strongly recommend it if you're interested in the topic. What's more, we talk about the difference in dating in California and Belgium, and it's a really interesting one. So hope you enjoy.
So I'd say with the Flemish, it's like you mentioned, they usually start as friends and then they move into the more serious dating, but the pace is so slow. It's really like, and I'm excluding Grinder from this conversation, where sex happens at usually the first interaction. And I don't have experience on Grinder, but I have experience on other dating apps, and also meeting people in person for dates, from getting asked out in a bar or something like that. And the pace is really slow, and it falls into this like situationship category all the time, where you really don't have labels. You don't know what it is, and there's really no rush to do it. That is totally different from where I come from. Where I come from, like if you ask somebody out on a date, it's already plausibly assumed that you two are dating, in the sense that you are going on dates together and you're not going out with other people during that time period. You're seeing if you two work out. You're testing the waters. Here, that doesn't mean that at all. You can be dating many, many people for a long time until you clarify, hey, the two of us, we're boyfriend and girlfriend, boyfriend and boyfriend. We're exclusive. And so I was not used to that. And I ended up getting hurt a lot when, I had been on multiple dates with somebody and I really started to like them. And, it came up that they were dating other people. And I was really taken aback by that. I couldn't quite comprehend that they were juggling multiple other people at the same time. My brain just doesn't work like that. When I'm focused on one potential interest, I see that through. And then if that doesn't work, that avenue is closed for some reason, then I would move on. So that was really a potential hiccup for me in the beginning. And also, I would say not only that, but the idea of romanticism was also one of the initial barriers. Like when people talk about marriage here in Flanders, oftentimes it's just assumed, yeah, we go to City Hall and we sign papers. That's like how the two of us get married. And I'm over here thinking like, oh yeah, it's like my big fat Greek wedding style, or like some crazy destination wedding, big, over the top. That's more the American way, I would say.
The first point, a lot of Europeans listening to this podcast might say, wait. But the Americans have the talk, and like they're dating multiple people until they have the talk. What you're saying is actually, no, you guys are the ones that are dating around. Do you think that's different in the gay dating scene? Or what do you think about the whole like dating around in the US until you have the talk?
Yeah. So coming from a rural perspective, this is definitely the case that I don't think you're dating around multiple people, because there may not be multiple people, multiple bachelors. But also, I would say that the big difference here is that the talk doesn't seem to come very quickly. It can come after many, many dates. And also, I meet a lot of my friends here in Flanders who don't actually know what the two partners are yet, what they are, which is, in my mind, like the situationship category, which to me is more of like where the communication falls through the cracks. Is, if one person wants it but nobody has brought it up, that it leads to a lot of miscommunication. But here the difference, I would say, is just that it's assumed to be slower. The pace is slower, there's no rush, and also that correlates to marriage age as well. it's earlier in the US among both heterosexual and homosexual than it is in Flanders. So, people aren't thinking about getting married or having kids until later in their life.
I wonder if the whole idea with romance, I mean, it's the pop culture of the US as well. It's like you grow up with Hollywood movies and songs, and it's the, driving off into the sunset. Whereas even if you watch movies from, I don't know many movies from the Netherlands, for example. There aren't that many movies, to be honest. There's the movie about a woman getting cancer. That one I know, but there's not many. About Belgium, I'm not sure because they often make movies along with France. But even speaking of French movies, the traditional European movie, it's that there is not really a happy ending often, right? It's usually like the ending is kind of, kind of sad and kind of gray and kind of realistic. It's the realisticness of life.
So it's interesting because the Americans think of the Europeans as like the romanticized daters, the ones that are like, oh, they put so much effort into it. I think this is true of Southern Europeans, that the Americans view it as really the romantic types, the ones that, invest all or nothing, that are passionate lovers, especially the Italians. I think the Spaniards, that we have this impression of them. I would say the difference is that in the movie styles, like even the ones that are maybe like more European style, like for gay movies, Call Me by Your Name, that it is more realistic. So I would echo your point that it's trying to capture some of the heartbreak. Maybe some of the more nuances of dating, instead of just the rom-com falling into the tropes of like enemies to lovers or anything like that. I still love rom-coms, even the tropey ones, but I do think it's trying to portray it. I think, however, in the gay movie department, it goes way over the top. They're all about heartbreak, every single one of them. Brokeback Mountain was about heartbreak. Call Me by Your Name was about heartbreak. One of my favorites, Firebird, one that was depicted in the Cold War, was about heartbreak. And so it doesn't really paint a glossy image of or any particular example of healthy relationships that are stable. And so, yes, realism is important, but there's also this kind of hope that's missing as well.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think there's a practicality, right? When it comes to even the way that relationships are formed, it's moving in together, but it's not really getting married, because moving in together saves, you cut down the costs, and it just makes sense from the practical point of view. Um, and so that's kind of interesting, right? Because as like a diehard romantic like yourself or like me, there's a lot missing in that kind of, okay, well, this makes sense logistically, but is it romantic? That's the other question.
Yes, and you know how many times I've heard either here or in the Netherlands or from Northern Europeans. Yeah, I ask, why did you get married? Well, they say, of course, it was love. And then I also sometimes hear, oh, but the tax purposes, oh, much better, much better with the tax purposes. And I understand when the taxes are so high here that it is an incentive to be getting married, but it's a culture shock for me to even hear that that's a reason. Even if it was a reason in the United States, which I think it is, I think it's a factor, you would never say it. It would be something that you would always kind of keep inside. And so here, I think they're just honest, like, yeah, tax wise, it makes more sense. Bureaucratically, it makes more sense. And I must say, as an international, I honestly, I do value that now, because dating wise, it makes the future more certain.
Hope you all enjoyed this collage style podcast. Obviously, this is not the new normal. This is something that I'm going to put out once in a while when we don't have a regular episode. But if you enjoyed the interviews, if you want to learn more about each guest, then go check out the full episodes. And of course, if you like the channel, if you like what I'm doing, if you want to support and bring me closer to my goal, your follow, your comments are all appreciated. Engagement helps me grow so much. So please don't underestimate that. Click on the follow or rating the podcast 5 stars, because that really is a life changer for me and where I'm going with this. So thank you all for listening. Until next time, stay curious, stay human.